The stars had never looked so peaceful to Ambassador Zephyr as they did from the bridge of the Council ship Harmony. For 3,000 years, his people had traveled between worlds, meeting new species and bringing them into their great family of planets. Each time was the same happy story. They would arrive, share their advanced technology, and welcome another civilization into the Galactic Council. Zephyr's crystalline skin reflected the soft lights of his ship as he studied the data. About their newest target, the third planet of a yellow star system, showed signs of intelligent life. The beings there had already reached their own moon and were building structures in space around their world. This made them perfect candidates for Council membership. But something was wrong with the readings. The planet itself was like nothing the Council had ever seen. Massive storms raged across its surface with winds that could tear apart most Council buildings. The ground shook regularly from something called earthquakes. Water fell from the sky in such quantities that it could flood entire regions. Frozen water fell from the sky in chunks large enough to damage vehicles. The planet's surface was covered with creatures that killed and ate each other. Plants grew thick and wild, fighting each other for space and light. The oceans held creatures larger than most Council ships, with teeth designed for tearing flesh. Even the smallest life forms on this world seemed built for violence. The Council, scientists had a name for such places. They called them Deathworlds, planets so hostile that life should not be able to exist there, let alone develop intelligence. In all their travels, the Council had never found a Deathworld that had produced a spacefaring species. Commander Vex, the military officer assigned to the mission, laughed when he saw the reports. "Look at this place," he said to Zephyr. "Nothing but storms, earthquakes, and monsters. How did anything survive long enough to build spaceships?" Zephyr was more careful in his judgment. As the Council's best diplomat, he had learned that every species was different. But he had to admit the planet looked terrible. His own homeworld had gentle rains, calm seas, and creatures that mostly ate plants. The idea of living on such a violent world made him feel sick. The ship's sensors picked up radio signals coming from the planet. The signals were organized and complex, clearly showing intelligent thought. More importantly, they detected several artificial objects in orbit around the planet. The beings down there had definitely reached space. "Send the standard first contact message," Zephyr ordered. "Let them know we come in peace." The message was broadcast on all frequencies the aliens were using. It contained mathematical concepts, basic pictures, and the universal symbols the Council used to show friendly intentions. Within hours, they received a response. The alien message was surprisingly clear. It contained similar mathematical concepts and what appeared to be an invitation to meet. Coordinates were provided for a location in space near the planet's single moon. 3 days later, Zephyr found himself face to face with the strangest beings he had ever encountered. They called themselves humans, and they were unlike anything in the Council's vast database of species. The humans were small, barely reaching Zephyr's shoulder height. Their skin was soft and seemed to offer no protection at all. They had no natural weapons like claws or sharp teeth. Their bones looked thin and breakable. Everything about them suggested weakness and fragility. The human leader introduced himself as Captain Jake Morrison. He spoke through a translation device that converted his words into Council standard. His manner was polite and respectful, exactly what Zephyr expected from a primitive species meeting their betters for the first time. "We welcome you to our system," Morrison said. "This is an honor for all of humanity." Zephyr smiled, a gesture that translated well across most species. "We are pleased to meet you as well. We represent the Galactic Council, a union of over 200 worlds working together for peace and prosperity." Morrison's eyes lit up with interest. 200 worlds? That's incredible. We've always wondered if we were alone in the universe. "You are far from alone," Zephyr replied. "And you no longer need to struggle by yourselves. The Council is prepared to offer your species protection and guidance." The human captain's expression changed slightly. "Protection from what?" "From the dangers of space," Zephyr explained patiently. "Your species is clearly new to interstellar travel. There are many hazards you cannot yet understand. Pirates, cosmic phenomena, hostile environments. The Council can provide you with safe passage, advanced technology, and the wisdom of older civilizations. Morrison nodded slowly. And what would you want in return? This was the standard part of the negotiation. Zephyr had given this speech hundreds of times. Your world appears to have abundant natural resources. The Council would establish mining and harvesting operations to help fund your protection and development. Your people would be given useful work in these operations, and your leaders would serve as local administrators under Council guidance. The human was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had a different tone. So you want to take our resources and make us work for you? Zephyr was confused by the hostile interpretation. Not at all. This is a partnership. You provide raw materials, we provide technology and protection. Your species would be valued members of the Council. As a client species, Morrison said. Well, yes, Zephyr admitted, but that's not a bad thing. Client species are protected and cared for. They don't have to worry about the dangers of independent space travel or the complexities of interstellar politics. Morrison looked at the other humans in his group. They spoke quietly among themselves in their own language. Finally, the captain turned back to Zephyr. Thank you for the offer, Morrison said. But humanity prefers to remain independent. We're interested in trade and friendship, but not in becoming anyone's client species. Zephyr felt a flutter of surprise. In 3,000 years of expansion, no species had ever refused Council protection. It simply didn't make sense. How could such a primitive species from such a hostile world think they could survive in space without help? I think you misunderstand, Zephyr said carefully. Your species is not ready for independent space travel. Your technology is centuries behind ours. Your world is a death world that has clearly made your development difficult. The Council's guidance would help you overcome these natural disadvantages. Something changed in Morrison's expression. His eyes became harder, and when he spoke, his voice was very calm and controlled. Ambassador Zephyr, he said, I think you're the one who misunderstands. We didn't survive on Earth despite it being hostile. We survived because we learned to deal with hostile environments. We don't need protection from the dangers of space. We are the dangers of space. The human delegation left shortly after that. Zephyr was left staring at their departing ship, a crude but functional vessel that somehow seemed more threatening than it had before. Commander Vex joined him at the observation window. Arrogant little primitives, he said. They actually think they can refuse us. Zephyr was troubled by something in the human captain's manner. Perhaps we should try a different approach. These beings might be more capable than they appear. Vex laughed. Look at them, Zephyr. They're tiny, weak, and they come from a world that should have killed them before they invented fire. How dangerous could they possibly be? That night, Zephyr sent his report back to the Council. He recommended patience and further study before making any decisions about the humans, but his report was one voice among many, and the Council's response was swift and unanimous. If the humans would not accept Council protection willingly, it would be provided by force. After all, the galaxy was a dangerous place and primitive. Species needed guidance whether they wanted it or not. The Council had never failed to bring a species into the fold, and they were not about to start with a handful of Deathworlders from an insignificant yellow star system. The war fleet began, assembling within days. General Lucas Harper stood in the command center of Earth's primary orbital defense station, watching the alien fleet approach through the dark of space. The massive ships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the light of Earth's sun. They were beautiful in their own way, like floating cities made of crystal and metal. The ships were also completely wrong for actual fighting. Harper had spent 30 years in Earth's military, rising through the ranks during humanity's expansion into space. He had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, dealt with corporate warfare on Mars, and handled 3 different rebellions on the outer colonies. He knew what real warships looked like, and these weren't them. The alien vessels were too big, too shiny, and too slow. They broadcast their positions openly, moved in predictable patterns, and seemed more concerned with looking impressive than being effective. It was like watching a parade instead of an invasion force. "Sir," called Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her station, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead ship." "Put it through," Harper ordered. The main screen filled with the image of an alien creature Harper had never seen before. Unlike Ambassador Zephyr's crystalline appearance, this being looked like a cross between a bird and a reptile, with bright feathers and sharp, intelligent eyes. When it spoke, its voice was proud and commanding. "I am Fleet Admiral Quill of the Galactic Council Defense Force," the alien announced. "You have 72 hours to surrender your world and accept Council protection. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force to ensure minimal casualties on both sides." The transmission ended. Harper looked around the command center at his staff. Most of them were trying not to smile. 72 hours? Said Major Pete Sullivan. "That's awfully generous of them." "They're giving us time to think about it," Rodriguez added. "How polite." Harper activated the general communication system that would reach every human military installation in the solar system. "All stations, this is General Harper. The aliens have given us 3 days to surrender. I think we should send them a reply." The reply was simple and came from an old Earth tradition. Harper had learned the phrase in military history class, spoken by defenders who refused to give up no matter what the odds. It was only 4 words, but it said everything that needed saying. "Come and take it." The response seemed to confuse the aliens. Their ships continued their slow approach but made no other moves. Harper used the time to study their formation and tactics through long-range sensors. What he saw convinced him that the Council had never fought a real war. The alien fleet moved like they were participating in a ceremony. Each ship stayed in its assigned position. They maintained constant communication with each other, using easily detected signals. Their weapons were visible and followed predictable patterns. Everything about their approach suggested they expected Earth to fight by the same rules they did. That was their first mistake. Captain Kelly Stone commanded the stealth ship Shadow, hidden in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Her ship was one of 12 similar vessels built for reconnaissance and special operations. The aliens had no idea these ships existed. "Target acquired," Stone reported to Harper. "Large supply vessel, minimal escort, standard formation." "You are cleared for attack," Harper replied. "Show them how we do business." The Shadow emerged from behind a large asteroid, moving fast and quiet. The alien supply ship never saw it coming. Stone's weapons disabled the vessel's engines and communication systems in the first attack. Her boarding team, led by Sergeant Danny Wells, was inside the alien ship before its crew knew they were under attack. What Wells found inside shocked him. The alien crew had no idea how to respond to boarders. They had weapons, but they were clearly designed for ceremonial use, rather than actual fighting. Most of the crew simply stood in the corridors waiting for someone to tell them what to do. "This is weird, General," Wells reported over his comm system. "These guys act like they've never been in a real fight before." The alien captain, a being that looked like a walking flower, approached Wells with its hands raised. "I surrender my vessel," it said through a translation device. "Please treat my crew with honor according to the rules of civilized warfare." Wells looked around at the ornate corridors and comfortable living spaces. Everything was designed for luxury, not combat. "What rules?" he asked. The alien seemed confused by the question. "The Galactic Conventions on Warfare. Surely your species follows the accepted protocols for military engagement?" Wells had never heard of any galactic conventions. "We follow our own rules," he said. "You attacked our system. Now you're prisoners." The concept seemed to terrify the alien captain more than the actual capture. "But we haven't had a formal battle yet. The rules clearly state that prisoners may only be taken after proper engagement between fleets of equal size." It was Wells, turned to be confused. "You came here to invade us. We're defending ourselves. There are no rules in a fight for survival." Back on the defense station, Harper received reports from similar attacks throughout the solar system. Every engagement told the same story. The aliens fought like they were playing a game with preset rules that everyone was supposed to follow. They announced their attacks, moved in predictable patterns, and seemed genuinely shocked when humans didn't do the same. Admiral Quill's response to the attacks was exactly what Harper expected. The alien fleet stopped its advance and sent another transmission. "Your attacks on our supply vessels violate all accepted standards of honorable warfare," Quill announced. "We demand you return our captured personnel and engage our fleet in proper formation." Harper's reply was broadcast on all frequencies so every ship in both fleets could hear it. "Admiral Quill, you came to our system to force us into submission. You threatened our people and our freedom. There is nothing honorable about invasion. If you want a fight, you'll get one, but it won't be by your rules. It will be by ours." The alien fleet began moving again, but now they seemed uncertain. Their perfect formations became ragged as ship commanders tried to account for threats they couldn't predict or understand. They had come expecting a formal duel between gentlemen warriors. Instead, they found themselves in a fight with an enemy that had no interest in playing by civilized rules. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Rodriguez led a squadron of Earth's newest fighters in the first major engagement. The human ships were smaller, faster, and more maneuverable than anything the aliens had. They came from multiple directions at once, hit hard, and disappeared before the aliens could respond effectively. The alien fighters were works of art, beautiful and graceful in their movements. They were also completely useless in actual combat. They moved in formation, broadcast their intentions, and seemed more concerned with looking elegant than staying alive. Rodriguez's pilots tore through them like wolves attacking sheep. "They fight like they're dancing," reported Captain Steve Miller after his first engagement. "It's like they've never seen real combat before." The truth was becoming clear to Harper and his commanders. The Galactic Council had achieved peace through superior technology and overwhelming numbers, not through military skill. They had never faced an enemy that refused to follow their rules or that had been shaped by constant conflict and struggle. Fleet. Admiral Quill made one last attempt at formal warfare. He moved his remaining ships into a traditional battle line and sent a challenge for Earth's fleet to meet him in open combat. Harper's response was to launch every fighter, bomber, and missile platform Earth possessed in a coordinated attack from 17 different directions. The battle was over in 4 hours. Half the alien fleet was destroyed or captured. The rest fled back toward Council space, carrying word of humanity's first military victory. As Harper watched the enemy ships disappear into hyperspace, he knew this was only the beginning. The Council would return with more ships and different tactics. But they would return with something else as well, something they had never carried into battle before. They would return with fear. The Council emergency meeting took place on the neutral world of Haven, far from the front lines of what was becoming a very different kind of war than anyone had expected. Ambassador Zephyr sat in the great crystal chamber alongside representatives from over 50 Council worlds, all trying to understand how their perfect military machine had failed so completely. Commander Vex stood at the center of the chamber, his bright feathers dulled with shame and exhaustion. The reports he carried painted a picture that no one in the Council wanted to believe. "The humans don't fight like any species we've encountered," Vex began, his voice barely steady. "They ignore every convention of civilized warfare. They attack, without warning, strike from hidden positions, and show no mercy to defeated enemies." Elder Nix of the Peaceful Collective raised a tentacle in question. "Surely you mean they are simply unfamiliar with proper military protocol? Once we explain the rules of engagement, they will understand." Vex's laugh was bitter and strange. "We tried that, Elder. After each engagement, we sent communications explaining proper military conduct. Their response was always the same. They told us that the only rule in war is to win." The chamber fell silent. The concept was alien to every being present. War was a tool of diplomacy, a way to settle disputes when negotiation failed. It had rules, limits, and acceptable casualties. The idea of fighting without any constraints was terrifying. "What about their casualties?" asked Counselor Bloom of the Garden Worlds. "Surely they must be suffering losses as well." Vex activated, a holographic display showing battle statistics. The numbers told a story that made several council members physically sick. In 12 major engagements, the humans have lost 47 ships and approximately 2,000 personnel. We have lost over 300 ships and 30,000 people. He paused, looking around the chamber. The humans celebrate these numbers. They call them favorable exchange rates. Dr. Helen Foster had been studying captured alien equipment and biology for 3 months since the war began. Her laboratory on Mars had become the center of humanity's effort to understand their enemy. What she found disturbed her more than any weapon or technology could. The aliens were physically and mentally adapted for life on worlds where survival was easy. Their bones were hollow like birds, their skin was thin and sensitive, and their muscles were designed for grace rather than strength. Most shocking of all, their brains showed no development in the areas that controlled aggression or rapid decision-making under stress. "They're not built for fighting," Foster explained to General Harper during one of their regular briefings. "Everything about their evolution suggests they come from worlds where cooperation and peaceful behavior were the keys to survival." Harper studied the biological data with interest. "What about their technology? Their ships are definitely more advanced than ours." "That's the strange part," Foster continued. "Their technology is incredible, but it's all designed for exploration, communication, and comfort. Even their weapons seem to be built more for show than for actual combat. It's like they developed all this amazing science but never needed to use it for war." This information reached the front lines where Commander Lisa Parker was preparing the defense of the Mars colonies. The Red Planet had become humanity's second major stronghold, and intelligence suggested the aliens were planning a large-scale assault. Parker had spent 2 years on Mars before the war began, helping to establish the mining and research facilities that made human expansion possible. She knew every tunnel, every building, and every environmental challenge the planet presented. When the alien fleet appeared in Mars orbit, she was ready. The second wave of council ships was larger and more cautious than the first. Fleet Admiral Quill had been replaced by Admiral Talon, a veteran of the Council's few previous military actions. Talon had studied the reports from Earth and believed he understood the human advantage. "They use surprise and unconventional tactics," he explained to his fleet commanders. "We will counter this by maintaining strict formation, constant communication, and overwhelming firepower. They cannot hide from an entire fleet." Talon was right about one thing. The humans couldn't hide from his entire fleet. But Parker had no intention of hiding. The Martian defense plan was based on a simple principle that the aliens couldn't understand. If you can't avoid a fight, make sure it happens where you have every advantage. Parker waited until the alien fleet entered Mars orbit and began landing operations on the planet's surface. Then she turned Mars itself into a weapon. The Red Planet's thin atmosphere meant nothing to humans who had already conquered it for colonization. They had built sealed habitats, developed specialized equipment, and learned to work in the constant dust storms that swept across the surface. For the aliens, Mars was a nightmare environment that their equipment couldn't handle. Colonel Ryan Brooks led the ground forces defending the main colony. His men moved through dust storms that blinded alien sensors and disabled their vehicles. They used the planet's natural cave systems to appear and disappear like ghosts. Most importantly, they fought with a ferocity that the aliens had never seen before. The psychological impact on the alien forces was immediate and devastating. Captured enemy personnel spoke of fighting creatures that seemed to feel no fear and showed no mercy. The humans adapted to any environment with terrifying speed and turned every disadvantage into a tactical opportunity. "They're not like us," one captured alien officer told his interrogators. "We fight to win battles. They fight to destroy enemies completely. There's no compassion, no honor, no limits to what they'll do to achieve victory." Brooks documented these interviews in his field reports. The aliens genuinely couldn't understand human military thinking. They expected their enemies to follow rules, show mercy to the defeated, and accept surrender when casualties reached acceptable levels. Humans did none of these things. The breaking point came during the Battle of Olympus Mons, the largest mountain in the solar system. Admiral Talon had established a command base on the mountain slopes, believing its height would give his forces a tactical advantage. Parker's response was to collapse part of the mountain on top of them. Using mining explosives and carefully placed charges, human engineers triggered a controlled avalanche that buried half the alien base under tons of rock and ice. It was a tactic no council species would ever consider, because it violated every rule of civilized warfare. Talon's final message to the council was transmitted from his damaged flagship as it fled Mars' orbit. "These are not rational beings," he reported. "They treat war like survival, not diplomacy. They use their planet's environment as a weapon. They show no fear of death and no mercy for enemies. We are not fighting a military force. We are fighting a species that has been shaped by constant struggle for survival." The message reached the council chambers just as reports arrived from other human colonies. Every engagement told the same story. Humans didn't just fight to win battles. They fought to completely destroy anything that threatened them. Dr. Foster's analysis was proven correct in the most terrifying way possible. The council species had evolved on peaceful worlds where cooperation and negotiation solved conflicts. Humans had evolved on a world where violence and competition were daily realities. The difference in military capability wasn't just technological or tactical, it was evolutionary. Ambassador Zephyr, who had started this war with his first contact mission, now found himself studying casualty reports that grew worse every day. The humans weren't just winning. They were learning and adapting faster than the council could develop new strategies. "How long can this continue?" asked Elder Nix during another emergency session. Zephyr looked at the latest intelligence reports. Human shipyards were working around the clock. Their military was growing stronger with each battle. Most troubling of all, they were beginning to move beyond defensive operations. "Not long," Zephyr replied. "If we don't find a way to end this war soon, they're going to bring it to us." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Council faced the possibility of complete defeat. Admiral Connor Blake stood on the bridge of the flagship CNS Liberty as the combined human fleet prepared for humanity's first offensive operation beyond the solar system. 6 months of defensive warfare had taught them everything they needed to know about their enemy. Now it was time to take the fight to the Council's doorstep. The human fleet looked nothing like the elegant alien vessels they were hunting. Every ship was built for one purpose: destroying enemy forces as efficiently as possible. They were ugly, functional, and deadly. Earth's shipyards had worked around the clock to produce vessels designed specifically for taking war to an enemy that had never experienced real invasion. Blake had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. Though he had never imagined the enemy would be aliens from space, he had studied every great military campaign in human history, from ancient battles to modern conflicts. The lessons were always the same: hit the enemy where they're weak, move faster than they can respond, and never give them time to recover. "All ships report ready for jump," announced Captain Kelly Stone from her position at the communications station. She had been promoted after her successful raid on the alien supply convoy and now served as Blake's chief of operations. "Signal from Earth Command," added Lieutenant Rodriguez. "General Harper sends his regards and reminds you that the entire solar system is counting on this mission." Blake nodded grimly. The intelligence reports were clear. The Council was preparing a third wave of attacks, this one involving ships from over 20 different worlds. If humanity waited for that fleet to arrive, even their superior tactics might not be enough to save Earth. The solution was typically human. Attack first, attack hard, and keep attacking until the enemy lost the will to fight. The first target was a Council supply depot in the Beta Centauri system. Intelligence from captured alien personnel had revealed that the depot provided fuel and materials for the entire Council war effort in this region of space. Destroying it would cripple their ability to launch further attacks. The human fleet jumped into the system without warning and immediately began their assault. The depot was defended by a small Council flotilla that seemed more surprised than prepared. The battle lasted less than 3 hours. Captain Pete Sullivan led the boarding teams that secured the depot's control center. What they found there confirmed everything Dr. Foster had theorized about Council psychology. The alien defenders had surrendered the moment human forces breached their outer defenses. They just gave up, Sullivan reported to Blake. No last stand, no fighting to the death, nothing. They handed over their access codes and asked us to please treat them well. The depot's commander, a being that looked like a walking tree with golden bark, seemed genuinely confused by human behavior. Why do you destroy everything? It asked through its translator. We surrendered. The facility is yours. There is no need for further violence. Sullivan looked around at the burning wreckage of alien ships and equipment. The humans had indeed destroyed everything of military value, even after the surrender. It was standard doctrine: deny the enemy any resources they might use against you later. We're not here to capture your stuff, Sullivan explained. We're here to make sure you can't use it against us anymore. The concept seemed to horrify the alien commander. But the resources, the technology, the knowledge stored here, some of these databases contain scientific discoveries that took centuries to develop. You're destroying irreplaceable cultural treasures. Should have thought of that before you attacked our home, Sullivan replied. News of the depot's destruction spread through Council space faster than their ships could travel. The psychological impact was immediate and catastrophic. For 3,000 years, the Council had never lost a major facility to enemy action. The idea that primitives from a single system could penetrate their territory and destroy critical infrastructure was unthinkable. Admiral Blake didn't give them time to adjust to the new reality. The human fleet hit 3 more targets in rapid succession: a shipyard, a communications relay, and a Council military academy. Each attack followed the same pattern: overwhelming force, total destruction, and immediate withdrawal before reinforcements could arrive. The Council's response was exactly what Blake had expected. They scattered their remaining forces to protect their most important facilities, weakening their offensive capabilities and leaving them vulnerable to continued hit-and-run attacks. Major Danny Wells led a specialized unit called the Deep Strike Force, designed for operations far behind enemy lines. Their mission was to prove that nowhere in Council space was safe from human retaliation. Wells' target was a Council fortress world called Harmony Prime, the site of their main military headquarters. The planet was supposed to be impregnable, protected by orbital defense platforms and a permanent fleet of warships. The humans approached the system using a tactic the Council had never seen before. Instead of attacking directly, they spent 2 weeks studying patrol patterns, communication schedules, and supply routes. Then they struck during a shift change when the defenders were at their most vulnerable. The attack was over before most of the Council forces knew it had begun. Wells's ships appeared from hyperspace, destroyed 6 orbital platforms and 2 capital ships, and disappeared again within 30 minutes. The message was clear: the Council's most important worlds were no longer safe. The psychological warfare was working better than any conventional military strategy. Council worlds began demanding protection from their own government. Trade routes were abandoned as merchant ships refused to travel without massive military escorts. Several member species quietly began negotiating separate peace treaties with humanity. Dr. Foster, now serving as Earth's chief intelligence analyst, monitored Council communications and provided Blake with detailed assessments of enemy morale. Her reports painted a picture of an alliance falling apart under pressure it had never been designed to handle. "They're not built for this kind of war," she explained during a strategy meeting aboard the Liberty. "Their entire civilization is based on cooperation and peaceful expansion. The idea of an enemy that won't negotiate, won't surrender, and won't follow their rules is destroying their ability to function as a unified government." Blake studied the latest intelligence reports. Council military forces were being pulled back to defend their most important worlds. Their offensive operations had stopped completely. Most telling of all, several Council diplomats had attempted to contact Earth directly, bypassing their own military leadership. "They want to end this," Blake concluded, "but they don't know how to deal with an enemy that doesn't play by their rules." The turning point came when Blake's fleet reached the edge of Council core space, the region containing their oldest and most important worlds. The symbolic impact was enormous. No enemy force had ever penetrated this far into Council. Territory. The response from Council leadership was a desperate message broadcast on all frequencies. Ambassador Zephyr himself appeared on the transmission, looking older and more tired than when he had first made contact with humanity. To the human military forces, Zephyr began, his crystalline voice filled with exhaustion. We formally request negotiations to end this conflict. We acknowledge that our initial approach was inappropriate. We are prepared to discuss terms for a peaceful resolution. Blake's response was broadcast throughout both human and council space. His words would be remembered in history books for generations to come. You declared war on a species that survived ice ages, volcano eruptions, asteroid impacts, and planetary diseases. You tried to conquer people who had already conquered the most hostile world in the galaxy. Did you really think we were going to be impressed by your spaceships? The message continued with terms that were simple and non-negotiable. Complete council withdrawal from human space. Recognition of humanity as an independent species with full rights. Reparations for the damage caused by their invasion. Most importantly, a guarantee that no species would ever again be forced into council membership against their will. The council had 48 hours to respond. As Blake waited for their answer, he prepared his fleet for one final operation. If the council refused these terms, the human fleet would proceed to their capital world and end this war in the most direct way possible. Humanity had learned to be very good at ending things permanently. The signing ceremony took place aboard the human flagship CNS Liberty in orbit around the council's capital world of Unity. Admiral Connor Blake sat at the head of a long metal table, while the surviving leaders of the Galactic Council arranged themselves on the opposite side. The contrast between the two groups could not have been more striking. Blake wore a simple military uniform marked with the scars of 8 months of continuous warfare. Behind him stood Captain Kelly Stone, Major Danny Wells, and the other human, commanders who had turned the galaxy's most powerful alliance into a broken collection of frightened worlds. They looked tired, but victorious, like wolves after a successful hunt. Across from them sat Ambassador Zephyr, Elder Nix, and the remnants of the council leadership. Their elegant clothing was wrinkled, their proud bearing replaced by exhaustion and defeat. They had come to surrender to a species they had dismissed as primitive savages less than a year ago. The peace terms were read aloud by Captain Stone in both human standard and council languages. The document was simple, direct, and completely unlike any treaty the council had ever seen. There were no complex negotiations, no face-saving compromises, and no allowances for cultural differences. Humanity had won the war completely, and the terms reflected that reality. The Council would withdraw all military forces from human space immediately. They would pay reparations equal to the cost of rebuilding everything their invasion had destroyed. Most importantly, they would accept a complete restructuring of galactic law to prevent any species from being forced into council membership against their will. Ambassador Zephyr's hands shook as he signed the documents. When he finished, he looked up at Admiral Blake with an expression of confused defeat. "I must ask," Zephyr said quietly, "how did your species become so effective at warfare? We had studied your planet, observed your technology level, and calculated that you posed no significant military threat. Our projections indicated a swift victory with minimal casualties on both sides." Blake leaned back in his chair and considered the question. Behind him, his officers exchanged glances. They had heard similar questions from captured alien personnel throughout the war. The answer was always the same, and it always seemed to horrify their former enemies. "We didn't become effective at warfare," Blake replied. "We became effective at survival. Everything else was just application." President Maria Santos had arrived from Earth to oversee the transition to peace. As the elected leader of humanity, she would be responsible for establishing the new relationships between humans and the hundreds of council species. It was a responsibility she approached with careful thought and firm principles. The first meeting between Santos and the council leadership took place in the Liberty's main conference room. The human president looked around the table at beings from dozens of different worlds, all of them struggling to understand how their perfect civilization had collapsed so completely. "I want to be clear about something," Santos began. "We didn't fight this war because we enjoy violence. We fought because you tried to take away our freedom. You assumed that because we came from a hostile world, we would be grateful for your protection. That was your mistake." Elder Nyx raised a tentacle nervously. "But your world is so dangerous. How did your species survive long enough to develop intelligence?" Santos smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "That's exactly the point, Elder. Our world tried to kill us every single day for millions of years. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, diseases, predators, natural disasters. Everything that could go wrong did go wrong. We survived because we learned to fight back against anything that threatened us." She paused, looking at each council member in turn. "You came from garden worlds where cooperation and peaceful behavior were the keys to survival. We came from a world where violence and competition were daily realities. When you declared war on us, you weren't fighting another civilized species. You were fighting the end result of evolution's most brutal survival course." The psychological impact of this explanation was visible on every alien face. They had spent their entire lives believing that intelligence and civilization naturally led to peace and cooperation. The idea that some species might be shaped by constant conflict was terrifying. Admiral Jake Morrison, the same captain who had represented humanity during First Contact, was appointed as Earth's first galactic liaison. His job was to help rebuild the relationships between humans and Council species, but on terms that recognized humanity as an equal partner rather than a client species. Morrison's first official act was to establish the human embassy on Unity, the Council's capital world. The building was deliberately designed to look like a fortress rather than a diplomatic facility. The message was clear. Humans were peaceful neighbors, but they were also dangerous enemies. The embassy's opening ceremony was attended by representatives from over 100 council worlds. Morrison's speech that day would be quoted in galactic history books for centuries to come. "My species does not seek to rule the galaxy," Morrison announced. "We do not want to conquer your worlds or destroy your civilizations. We want only what every intelligent species deserves, the right to determine our own destiny. You tried to take that right away from us, and you learned that some species will fight to the death to preserve their freedom." He paused, looking out at the assembled crowd of alien diplomats. "We offer friendship to those who respect us, trade to those who deal honestly with us, and protection to those who need our help. But make no mistake, we also offer complete destruction to anyone who threatens our independence or the independence of others." Dr. Helen Foster was appointed to lead the new interspecies cultural exchange program. Her first publication, Understanding Deathworld Psychology, a guide for garden world species, became required reading for all council diplomatic personnel. The book explained in simple terms why species from hostile worlds develop differently than those from peaceful environments. It described how constant environmental pressure created individuals who were capable of rapid adaptation, creative problem-solving, and extreme violence when threatened. Most importantly, it taught council species how to recognize and respect Deathworld psychology instead of trying to control or civilize it. Foster's work led to the establishment of new diplomatic protocols for contact with species from hostile environments. The old system of offering protection and guidance was replaced with approaches based on mutual respect and equal partnership. The galaxy adapted slowly to the new reality. Trade resumed between human and council worlds, but now humans were the ones offering advanced military technology in exchange for council scientific knowledge. Several council species requested human military advisors to help them deal with pirate attacks and territorial disputes. The most significant change was in how the Council treated newly contacted species. The old protectorate system was abandoned completely. Instead, each new species was offered genuine partnership and allowed to develop at their own pace. The threat of another war with a Deathworld species made everyone much more careful about respecting other cultures. 5 years after the war ended, Ambassador Zephyr visited Earth as part of a diplomatic mission. He stood in the observation deck of the orbital station where General Harper had first planned humanity's defense, looking down at the blue and green world that had produced such formidable warriors. It's beautiful, he admitted to Morrison, who was giving him a tour of the human homeworld. From space, it looks so peaceful. Morrison smiled. That's the thing about Earth. It looks calm from a distance, but when you get close, you realize it's one of the most violent places in the galaxy. Storms, earthquakes, volcanoes, predators. Everything here is trying to kill everything else. Zephyr shuddered. And this made your species stronger? It made us survivors, Morrison corrected. Strong, adaptable, and very hard to kill. That's why we won the war. Not because we were better at fighting, but because we were better at refusing to give up. The lesson had been learned throughout the galaxy. Deathworlders were not primitive, savages to be conquered or civilized. They were apex survivors who had earned their place among the stars through trials that would destroy most other species. The galaxy was a much more respectful place after that understanding took hold.